Three things to like with the Be Lenka Velocity. Number one, if you've been looking for a barefoot shoe for training, primarily for lifting, some daily wear, and also for some cross training that has a flatter base to it, this can be a really good option to look into. So not every barefoot shoe designed for training is going to have this more like flat platform like sole. And so if you want a rigid wall around the entirety of your foot and you like a flatter shoe, this can be a really good option to look into. A good contrast to this model, for example, is the Innovate Bare XF. That model has a slightly more rounded sole, so you're not going to have this more planted, flat feel on the ground. And if that's something you're after, I think you'll like that with the Velocity model. The second thing to like with this shoe is their appearance and overall breathability. So this has been one of the most commented on barefoot shoes that I have ever worn. Literally every time I wear it to the gym, somebody says, "Those are sick shoes, what are they?" And if you like the appearance of the shoe, I think you'll resonate with them regarding how they look in a lot of different outfits, but then also in the gym when you're performing. They have this kind of nice blend between looking decent for daily wear, but then also performing well in the gym. And then also with this textile and TPU upper, it's not so heavy to where it limits breathability. So even with thicker socks, the shoe breathes decently well. Now, is it going to be as ventilated as like a lightweight knit that has a ton of ventilation? Not necessarily, but for the thickness of the materials and how much durability I think you get with this added TPU, it still does a pretty good job with overall breathability. The third pro that I have with this model is the width of the forefoot and midfoot and just the articulation of the sole. So with this model, you have a 5 millimeter thick sole. However, you do not have a removable insole. So keep in mind that you will have a bit more material in this shoe with the insole added in compared to other models to where you can take that insole out. However, I do like how much flexibility you still get with the shoe, despite it having the slightly more platformy like build to it. So I don't think that's going to be a gripe, and that's actually something that I like with the shoe is that I thought it was going to be a little bit limited, but I didn't find that to be the case. And then also I really like that there's not an aggressive taper here with the midfoot and the forefoot. If you need more width, this can be a really good option to look into. It feels a little bit wider than models like the 100 Aerolux Barefoot, which also has this more platform build, and then also models like the Tolos Archetype 2.0 that has a slightly more sock-like fitting upper construction. So overall, the Be Lenka Velocity has been a strong shoe for lifting, cross-training, and daily wear. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with this model. So two cons that I could see folks having with the Be Lenka Velocity is number one, in the context of performance, I don't think this is going to be the best barefoot shoe for CrossFit workouts or workouts where you're doing a little bit more running. So I like this sole construction for lifting in certain cross-training settings where I'm doing kettlebell flows and stuff where I like to have a bit more of a planted foot for certain parts of the movement, but then also being a little bit more dynamic. However, when it comes to running and sprinting and any form of multi-directional work, I find the sole to be just a little bit too clunky for my overall needs. For that context, I would rather look for something with a slightly lower profile and snugger fitting upper with a slightly more rounded sole. I think it just feels a little bit more natural when you're doing those training contexts. The second con that I have with this model is when you're breaking them in, a pro tip for you is if this tongue is having any rumble at the top of your foot, wear slightly longer socks. So this has a mesh tongue. This can rub at times and you can get a little bit of friction there. So if you have a higher volume foot or a higher instep, this will be something that you'll want to consider with a shoe because that will be more prevalent for you. So just pro tip there, and you could kind of work this with your hand and kind of expedite the break-in because you do have some padding here, which does help mitigate this. However, I do think for some folks, they might find it to have a little bit of friction. So just wear longer socks when you're breaking the shoe in, and that should help mitigate that issue. But now let's talk about the performance of the Be Lenka Velocity. To break down the performance of the Be Lenka Velocity, I'll discuss how the shoe performs for lifting, cross-training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, this shoe is really solid. Now, do I love that you can't take the insole out to get closer to the ground? Not necessarily. This doesn't have a finished internal construction. So, for example, if I wanted a shoe built out for powerlifting or just having maximal ground feel with an even grippier outsole, this would not necessarily be my go-to shoe, but for static strength work, the shoe does a good job. It's worth noting that with this outsole construction, it doesn't have grippier lugs, and so if you are just really worried about maximal ground feel, maximal grip regarding traction with lugs, this might not be your best bet, but honestly, I think for most general lifting sessions where you're doing deadlifts, squats, machine work, any form of lunge, split squat, etc., this shoe will give you plenty enough grip for those contexts. It's just like those really niche performance asks when it comes to lifting where this model might not be the most optimized for your needs. But for the most part, I have enjoyed the flexibility and the ground feel with the shoe, and I also like that you have a lot of width here. I never really feel like I'm limited in this model, and it's really easy for me to splay my toes, and I have an E to double E with foot. When it comes to cross training, I like this shoe for the most part. It has kind of a sporty feel to it. I like that the boot has additional padding. It helps lock this foot down, and the midfoot security in this shoe is pretty solid as well. The tongue is gusseted so it doesn't really slide. And so if you're doing kettlebell flows, if you're doing box jumps, jump rope, anything that's a little bit more monotonous or it's a bit more structured regarding having your foot be planted and then also a little bit dynamic, this shoe can work really great. Where I don't love this shoe for cross training is if I'm doing any form of really fast or explosive lateral work. The shoe can feel a tad bit clunky at times, but I do feel like that ask is very niche, just like the lifting topic I just talked about. So I don't think it's going to be an issue for most folks. And so all that said, if you are an athlete and you want a shoe that feels very sock-like, this shoe might not be your best bet, but for most folks, it'll be plenty fine. For short runs, the shoe is okay. And honestly, I don't love it for runs longer than a half mile. And if I do run in the shoe, I prefer it being on a treadmill or a curved treadmill. This model just feels a little bit clunky for that ask for me. When I'm running in barefoot shoes, it's generally shorter runs or sprints. And so for both of those asks, this shoe is just kind of subpar, especially when you compare it to barefoot shoes that are more built out for running. Again, I think what holds this shoe back is just the sole here. It just feels kind of platformy at times, and it doesn't give you that more lively barefoot shoe feel that a lot of folks want out of their barefoot shoes for running. When it comes to daily wear, I have thoroughly enjoyed this shoe. And again, like I've got a lot of compliments on this model, which is ironic because I don't necessarily love this colorway. The blue is like a little bit too bright for me, but I also think that a lot of folks like that. So when it comes to a daily wear context, this shoe I think does a really good job at playing in both worlds of both lifting, cross training, but then also looking good and being comfortable for daily wear. When it comes to the lifting breakdown of the shoe, I'd give this model an 8.5 out of 10. For cross training, a strong 8 out of 10. For running, a 7.5 out of 10. And then for daily wear, a strong 8.5/9 out of 10, just because I have gotten so many compliments on this shoe. So when it comes to the price of the Be Lenka Velocity, you can expect to pay $139. Now, at the time of filming this video, pretty much every colorway has been marked down. This colorway is currently going for $79, and I'm kind of bummed about that because I did pay full price for the shoe. But all that to say, I think if you can find this model on a discount and you do want that shoe for lifting and daily wear, this can be a really strong option to go with. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the Be Lenka Velocity? So number one, if you're an individual that wants a barefoot shoe for lifting and then daily wear that also looks decently good dressed up, I think this can be a good option, especially if you are somebody that likes the TPU overlays around the colorways and how that makes the shoe pop a little bit more. The second context where I think the shoe makes a lot of sense is for my folks who want a flatter midfoot into forefoot transition with their sole and their barefoot shoe. This can be a great option to go with. And then number three, if you want to save a little bit on your barefoot shoes, if you could find the shoe on sale, it makes a lot of sense. It's a really strong shoe. The durability has been stellar thus far, and the overall build quality of the shoe feels really strong. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, if you're somebody into CrossFit or running and that's what you want your barefoot shoe for, I would probably pass on the shoe. And then number two, if you have a high volume or high instep foot, you might want to be a little bit more conscious of this model and just how that tongue may cause a little bit of rub for you. You're going to have a longer runway to break the shoe in compared to somebody with a lower volume foot. When it comes to the sizing and fit of the Be Lenka Velocity, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. Now, it's important to look at the sizing guide for this shoe. I had to do that and I had to cross-reference, okay, what's a 10 US in their sizing? But when it comes to length, I think if you get that right, the length of this shoe feels really good, even with thicker socks. And just for context, this is an EU 43, which generally translates to a 10 US. Also, when it comes to width, again, I have an E to double E width foot. I have a normal arch regarding the height and volume of my foot, and my foot feels really good in the shoe. I can crank the laces down if I want more security or wear them a little bit looser, and they don't really feel insecure when I'm wearing them for walking and just taking the dog out or running errands and whatnot. So the sizing of the shoe I think should work for most foot anatomies, and if you have a 3E, 4E width foot, this shoe should also work for your needs because the upper volume in this model isn't that low. And then to quickly go over some relative sizing here. So this is a Primus Light 3 from Vivo Barefoot and a Zero Shoes Prio. These are size 10. When looking at the length of these three shoes put together, I'll put the heels down so we can kind of get an even look here. They're all somewhat similar in length. However, the Be Lenka is a smidge longer and it does have a bit more width up here through the forefoot, which is also why I like this model a little bit more for 3E and 4E width feet compared to some of the Vivo Barefoot models that can feel a little bit low volume or snug for certain foot anatomies, or the Zero shoes, which can just feel snug throughout for certain folks as well. All right, so covering the weight, heel, toe drop, and insole in the Be Lenka Velocity. For my size 43 EU model here, we have a 10.45 ounce weight. The heel to toe drop of the shoe sits at 0 millimeters, And this model does have a thin foam removable insole. However, the internal construction in the shoe is not finished. All right, so breaking down the construction of the Be Lenka Velocity, up here on the upper, you have a blend of textile and TPU materials. So you have this TPU overlay that wraps the entirety of the shoe, and then you also have textile uppers. You also have some synthetic overlays here that kind of enclose the forefoot and then also go through the midfoot on the lateral and medial side for aesthetic reasons. Looking at the boot of the shoe, you do have additional padding here to help give you additional lockdown and comfort when wearing this model. And then the tongue itself does have a bit of padding as well, but it does have this mesh top that can have a little bit of friction on the top of the foot. So keep that in mind again. But the tongue does have a gusset and it stays pretty secure throughout. Looking at the midfoot, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 core eyelets that go up. With the tongue itself, you also have a loop for additional security and some Be Lenka branding up here on the top of the tongue as well. You have an external heel tab back here on the boot, and then you have an active grip Neo sole in the shoe. This is slightly a lower profile tread that you get in this model, so you don't have a super aggressive tread. You do have some brakes up here in the forefoot and then throughout the entirety of the shoe to give you additional flexibility. And again, this sole does have a nice stitch to it, so it does have a nice durability, and it feels a lot flatter compared to other barefoot shoes out there. So again, if you like that more platform feel with your barefoot shoes, this can be a great option to go with. Then once again, you do have a thin foam removable insole, and this insole has some antibacterial moisture wicking tech to it, so I do like that as well. But that pretty much wraps up the gist of the shoe's construction. If you have additional questions, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, there's my review of the Be Lenka Velocity. Now, would I buy this shoe again? Honestly, I would, especially if I could find them on sale. I'm, again, bummed that I spent full price for this model and it's now like 50 bucks off from what I paid for, or actually $60, I'm not good at math. But the shoe has been exceptionally solid in the gym. It's very comfortable, has a nice wide fit. The durability of the sole has been solid thus far. And again, I've received a lot of compliments on this shoe, which I don't always get on the shoes that I'm reviewing and rotating and wearing throughout my days. But all that said, if you have additional questions on the Velocity, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.